Thank you, Stuart. And can I also add my thanks for the committee to introduce this topic to you today and allow us to talk to you about it, and also to the President for his leadership. So, science in the Arctic from the UK's perspective. Of course, as we heard from the American delegation this morning of a famous Brit who spent time in the Antarctic in that particular case, we have a long history of carrying out scientific endeavours in these sorts of regions. And you may or may not be surprised to know that I've spent a little bit of time here myself, although you will spot that I was rather younger and significantly lighter in weight when I was doing my work as a field hand. And it turns out my best friend's a glaciologist. We were looking at the basal ice and the basal ice at the margin of the ice sheet in Western Greenland, which was an extraordinarily wonderful opportunity for somebody like a physical scientist such as myself to really start to understand the physical processes. And that was, as you can see, quite a long time ago. And we've come a long way since then, both in terms of our capabilities, but also in terms of our reach. We are incredibly keen to collaborate. There are 4 themes that I wanted to talk to you about. First of all, we thought about this issue again, and the House of Lords has written a report, and there's a government response, trying to frame our future plans. There is great breadth and depth in what we're doing already and what we want to do in the future. The statistics are that we are 4th in the world in terms of citations of our scientific publications, and we in fact are 3rd in the world in terms of the number of articles on Arctic science. There's a lot of collaboration within the UK, and I wanted to mention, and I'll talk a little bit more about the Science and Innovation Network later, but also how that is funded by the Natural Environment Research Council to produce our Arctic research programme. And we have a programme which is funded to 16 million in Changing Arctic Ocean programmes, which is starting to come to an end. So I'm going to also tell you about some of the new activities that we're involved with as well. So our objectives, working in cooperation with Arctic states and Indigenous people through the Arctic Council in particular, but of course others as well. Promoting greater understanding through collaboration and policy development, but basing that on the scientific evidence. And then again, in terms of understanding the scientific evidence, then being able to support legitimate and responsible business and sustainable development. Now, we have a whole variety of different activities, and I don't have anything like the amount of time to go through all of them. I really wished I did. But working through the Arctic Council working groups is incredibly important to us. And we heard this morning about the black carbon issue. And that's just one of the areas that we really concentrate through working groups. The Science and Innovation Network is 96 people working in 38 different high commissions and embassies throughout the world. And they really cement, build, and understand those international partnerships. 77 universities in the UK are engaged in these activities, and they work through different organisations. For example, I mentioned here the EU PolarNet, but also NICE, which takes account of a particularly strong collaboration we have with Norway, which I think you heard about earlier on again today through their research vessel Lance. And that allows us also to make particularly good use of our permanent station, and I'll make some more comments about that slightly later. But in addition to that, our polar vessels and also our aircraft, all supported by, of course, the British Antarctic Survey. The Science and Innovation team is particularly strong in the Nordic regions, and they have a particular focus for the inclusion of indigenous knowledge. And yesterday we had a breakout group on traditional knowledge-based innovation in the age of climate change, which was co-hosted by the Arctic Institute. And I wanted to make a comment about that. Now, I'm a physical scientist. I'm interested in physical science processes, which are by and large not always terribly controversial in terms of the actual issue that you're talking about. This sort of thing, traditional knowledge, is a much more controversial, much more fraught issue to try and understand. It is all about people, which is, of course, always much more difficult to understand than pure physical processes. And what was great about this session is the way that people were willing to understand, think about, and listen to different points of view. They weren't just there to make sure that everybody understood their point of view. It was incredibly positive. And I felt really good about that kind of breakout session. And I think this is a particular strength of this meeting here. Very good, and I look forward to coming back for more of those. So anyway, back to the science programme for the UK. I mentioned the Arctic Research Programme at the present time. It's a £15 million NERC programme, and it tries to address the issues of what's causing rapid change in the Arctic, what processes affect the release of greenhouse gases, how do we improve our predictions. It's about creating that understanding and models, data, to inform our models better. Then understanding the risks of natural hazards in the Arctic. Are they increasing as due to this? Which ones are increasing most quickly? Things like that. And that gives us the evidence to then go forward with policy development, because it's then based on this sound scientific evidence. Let me tell you about a couple of the projects. Acadia project, and again, immediately you see this is a collaboration between the UK, Canada, US, and Germany. It's all about collaboration stupid, I suppose, if we were to continue that theme. And you can see that they publish their findings in Nature, which makes me incredibly jealous, because, of course, we all want to publish our findings in Nature, and we all know just how difficult that is. So the fact that they were able to do it speaks volumes about the quality of the work. What this was about was trying to understand the effect of airborne particles from phytoplankton and how they trigger ice formation in clouds. It's about these microscopic particles. It's about their morphology. It's about how water molecules are able to be adsorbed onto the surface of these sorts of particles. It's really a very complicated issue across different length scales of physical processes. But at the end of the day, it's about having that data to put into our climate modelling, the sort of things that the Meteorological Office in the UK is a world-leading expert in. Second project I was going to mention is called T-Cozy. Only the British could possibly have called a project T-Cozy. And again, of course the science is very complicated, and they've managed to publish in Nature Geoscience this time. Again, an excellent journal. But the basic's easy. If you've got a sea ice there, then the layer between the water and the air has a different relationships in terms of ability for turbulent processes than if you don't have the sea ice there. And how does that process, the change in those layers immediately above and below the surface of the water, which has a massive effect on climate change models, how do we understand those? How do we understand the feedback loops that have to go into these models? Small changes can make big changes in terms of weather patterns. Trying to understand those. There are a series of other projects I could talk to you about. The way we're starting to use data from the UK Navy in terms of temperatures of water layers and salinity, the sort of data that they have to collect all the time. But also trying to understand economic models in relation to those sorts of processes as well, so that again we can understand the socio-economic impacts on communities around this region. There's a tremendous amount. Many of them really rely on our permanent station here in the Arctic. So funded by NERC, again, crucial work by NERC, operated by BAS. It gives our scientists quality places to do quality work. Extremely important for us. So, the UK's open for partnership. It's all about the quality of the science, and we really know that we will not achieve what we need to achieve without the right kind of partnerships with other nations. We have a new programme which is being developed at the moment, and the first calls for projects are imminent, and that's another £16 million in development of investment in Changing Arctic Ocean programme. We are renewing our focus on connecting with the Arctic Council working groups to really make sure that we have access to the best science ourselves, and we make sure that our best science is available to everyone. So it's all about international collaboration. It's using our research stations, it's using our aircraft, and of course it's using our ships. So lastly, I'm absolutely delighted to say that we're investing £200 million in a new polar research vessel, which will be operational in 2018, 2019. It has a moon pool so that we can introduce things, remote vehicles and robotics, straight into the sea without putting things over the side, for example. That sort of practical issue is very important for scientists working in this area. Of course, it has fantastic laboratories. And for those aficionados in the audience, it can break through 1 meter of ice at 3 knots, 60-day duration with 60 scientists on board. No doubt the food goes further if you have less scientists. But most important, although they're all pretty hungry lot, but most importantly, 2 things. 1, it's going to be also about international collaboration. And 2, it's about the quality of the research science that's being done, so that I can continue to be jealous about hearing about all these publications in Nature and Science and so on and so forth. So thank you very much for your attention.